Yeah, we're talking about this again. I've been very vocal about my opinions on 2001, and 2001 fans who have seen my reviews have been very vocal about their feelings as well. But there is one issue here that has always been looming under the surface for me that I have never come out and addressed directly. Probably because this problem is directed right at the 2001 fans themselves, or at least some of them anyway. That's never the way I like to do things. When I complain about a movie, I'm always complaining about the movie. The audience who loves it is just an afterthought for me. I have never had a problem with anyone liking a film that I don't like. At best, I will be completely baffled at how someone could like these movies in the first place, but I would never come out and say, I don't like you for it, because that's just not the way that I think about it. Well, I'm still not going to do that here, because that's still not the way I feel, but what I am about to say is actually something akin to that. So all I can really do is hope that 2001 fans out there will bear with me and at least let me explain what I'm about to say. Guys, I have nothing against you personally. You're one of the most intelligent fan-base groups that I have ever known, and I'm glad that you can find beauty in a film that's caused so much grief for me over the years, although I think your values are somewhat misplaced. But the bottom line is that with regard to some of you, I don't like your attitudes. I don't think that should be taken as particularly insulting. There are plenty of people out there who don't like my attitudes towards what I do or don't consider to be valid expressions of art, and maybe rightfully so. But the attitude in this case is the notion that you are all not only absolutely correct that 2001 is a great, profound, and thought-provoking film, but that anyone who doesn't think so is a mentally challenged lackey who only wants to watch 300 in Independence Day. I'm going to paraphrase something Mortimer Adler said with regard to materialism here. The opinion that 2001: A Space Odyssey is a great movie may be a valid opinion, possibly supported by a substantial argument. Expressing such an opinion is not an error. Asserting that view dogmatically as an established truth, however, rather than an opinion that may be supported and correct, is a very serious error, a culpable mistake to be avoided. Both general audiences and high-profile critics have all done this with regard to 2001, expressing the belief that they are automatically right, and anyone who doesn't love this movie is automatically wrong. Let's look at one of the statements made in Roger Ebert's re-review of the film in his Great Movies segment. He first started out by describing the movie's opening where half the audiences around the world were walking out on the film, and he concludes with the following. To describe that first screening as a disaster would be wrong, for many of those who remained until the end knew that they had seen one of the greatest films ever made. This puts the event of half the people walking out on the film and the other half staying into the following context. The morons who just didn't get it all walked out, sure, but it was we, the most sophisticated of the bunch, who knew that we had seen one of the greatest films ever made. These are the kinds of statements that I take issue with. If you love the movie, great. But don't tell me that the movie has been dubbed great by the movie gods and that its greatness is an unchallengeable fact. Of course, this position is not just limited to the issue of 2001. Recently, I was watching an old Christopher Hitchens interview back in 1996 where he dared to say that Ronald Reagan may not have been the Jesus of a president that certain sections of the population make him out to be. When they got to the section where they take calls, I heard a woman say this.
Captain, she was getting very rude. And Mr. Hitchens, you can't say anything about President Reagan. The Congress holds the purses. And it was the Democratic Congress that gave the money for all of that. And they wanted to make him look bad, too. So you can't say anything bad about President Reagan. He was one of the best presidents we've ever had.
It's that you can't say that just because it's this person or this movie or this thing that everyone has already established as being great that I find intolerable. I've heard it 1,000 times. It was one thing, confused Matthew, when you were going after stooges like Michael Bay and the Wachowski brothers, but now you're picking on Kubrick and the Coens, and that's just plain unacceptable. For me, what is unacceptable is to shy away from a negative review on the grounds that the person who made the work has too much clout. I don't care if you're Michael Bay or Steven Spielberg or the vast majority of people who wrote Holy Writ. If your work sucks, I will tell you. I think I've gone on about this issue long enough, so let me introduce you to the reason why I brought you all here today. Terry Gilliam. Terry was interviewed a while back on AMC regarding his thoughts on Steven Spielberg and Stanley Kubrick, and this interview is perhaps a living flowchart of everything that is wrong with the mindset that I just discussed. Consider the following.
Spielberg is more successful. His films make much more money. But they're comforting. They give you answers, always. The films are answers. And I don't think they're very clever answers. And 2001 had an ending. I don't know what it means. I don't know, but I have to think about it. I have to work. And it opens up all sorts of possibilities, and probably the next person I speak to has a different idea of what that ending means. So now, suddenly we're in discussion. Now we're talking. Ideas come out of that. And that's what I always want to encourage. Spielberg and the success of most films in Hollywood these days, I think, is down to the fact they're comforting. They tie things up in nice little bows, gives you answers. Even if the answers are stupid, they're answers. Oh, you can go home and you don't have to worry about it. The Kubricks of this world and the great filmmakers make you go home and think about it.
Okay, let me be clear on a few things. People are never going to like all filmmakers, and expressing the opinion that you prefer one over the other is never wrong. But that isn't what Terry is doing here. He isn't reviewing the filmmakers. He's reviewing the audience, and he's making a great many assumptions about one audience over the other. The Spielberg audiences like Spielberg films because they don't make them think. They can remain stupid drones and lap up whatever he puts on the screen without having to think about it. Kubrick fans, on the other hand, are thinking fans, and they are the most sophisticated of the two. The other assumption being made here is that the reason most Hollywood films make money is because they have answers that people don't have to think about. Period. The thought is provided for them. This smug, superior position ultimately has nothing to do with either filmmaker. It is a commentary on one audience being smarter and more sophisticated than the other. Not only is this argument simple-minded and insulting, as I think most audiences are perfectly capable of enjoying both a Kubrick film and a Spielberg film, it's just plain not true. People did go home and think about Schindler's List. People did go home and think about the issues raised in Jurassic Park. And let's not forget the ambiguous ending to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which Gilliam never even addresses. The difference here is that Spielberg's films have a point for people to think about, whereas Kubrick films, by and large, have only obscurant imagery to think about, which is the most random and unguided of all thinking. The reason you can go home and talk to somebody else about the ending of 2001 and have two completely different interpretations is because there is no answer. Not because there's an answer you have to think about, but because it's not there. At all. Anywhere. It's like a Rorschach... Well, you've all heard my Rorschach test analogy. We don't really need to hash it out again. But the point is that narrow mindset of this way is always better and this way is always worse. It's almost elitist, and believe me, I don't use that word very often at all. It's that notion that a movie that is willfully vague and obscurant will always be better than a movie that isn't. That the mere act of hiding your meaning from audiences makes your attempt great, while the act of telling a story directly makes it a panderous and mainstream film. But the thing that gets me the most is that Gilliam is not criticizing any part of Spielberg's films. I have made a few harsh reviews of my own regarding Spielberg's films, and maybe I even went a little too far in some. Okay, I definitely went a little too far in some, but the bottom line is this. I criticized Spielberg's work because the story was awful, the writing was terrible, the conception was horrendous, and the very core concept of the film was deeply, deeply flawed and bullshit. Terry Gilliam is actually criticizing Spielberg's films not for being poorly written, not for being ill-conceived, but for simply being intelligible. It's the Terry Gilliams of the 2001 fanbase that I take issue with. If you guys think 2001 is a great movie with some deep philosophical meaning and plot, that's absolutely fine. But setting up the room of debate to make you look like the biggest thing in it doesn't do anyone any favors. It just makes you look like a bunch of self-righteous jerks who can't handle an opposing viewpoint. And I've said my piece. Run away!